named Andre Friedman. He was born in Budapest, 1913, and he was Jewish. And that would be something that would push him across Europe and eventually to the New World, to the Americas, based on the political climates in Europe at the time.
I bet.
He left Hungary when he was accused of being a communist sympathizer, which he would then say, okay, well, I got to get out of here. Like, literally,
I'm going to go to Germany.
Well, they said, listen, if you get out of town in 24 hours and don't come back to the country, we won't do anything to you. So he had the bad fortune of choosing Germany.
Well, that's kind of close by.
Well, actually, I wouldn't say, as I say that, it's not bad fortune, because that is where he was able to learn and perfect some of his trade, which is photography, and it actually is what launched his career.
I mean, the other option there is, right, that maybe he, actually was a Nazi and, intentionally moved to Germany and then, later in life was like, it was a mistake.
No. He was definitely against what the Nazis stood for, so that is definitely not
Great.
it. But
I'm not sure how many Jews were pro-Nazi.
Not
too many.
Fair enough.
And nobody's ever heard from them again.
Mm-hmm.
But no, so he went there. He stayed in Germany for about 2 years where he learned his craft, and then he left in 1933 and he moved to Paris.
Where the Germans will never get him.
Well,
Well, that was that thing about that war, though, right? Is that you could pretty much move almost anywhere in
the
Europe.
Germans will catch up with him.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So he gets to Germany. He meets a bunch of other immigrants there who are also become these huge names in photography. But while he's there, he meets this woman, and her name is, I listened to her name so many times, and I know I'm going to mess it up, and I apologize. It is Gerda Pohorel. I believe that's how you say it. And if I apologize if I mispronounce it. Like I said, I listened to it on a documentary a bunch of times, and I couldn't quite get it.
She's dead, so she can't complain.
Well, no, that's heartless. But the point is here, she and Andre Friedman meet. They begin to. They're both photographers. They're trying to sell photos and get jobs, but they're not really making any money. And she comes up with this brilliant scheme. She's the one that kind of makes Robert Capa, because here's what she figures out is that as a Jewish man, he is having a very hard time because there's prejudices and people just don't want to pay money for photos from this run-of-the-mill photo guy anyway. But if they say, and this is what they do, they say, listen, there's actually this very famous photographer named Robert Capa from America, and he's here, and I'm negotiating on his behalf, and it would be an insult for you to not pay him X amount for his photos. Well, his photos were good enough that we'll go ahead, we'll bring us this job, and they got it, and they get paid it.
I feel like
they pulled the whole thing off.
Good for them, actually.
I really feel like this speaks so deeply to me, because I have this deep-seated belief that women by and large are the ones who hustle. We are the ones who come up with these amazing business schemes and really hustle to make things happen.
That's sexist.
And oftentimes it's but oftentimes it is to build up somebody that you care about, often a man that you care about. But regardless, I just this speaks to me on such a deep level that she was just no, you know what we should do is just lie about it.
Well, but at the same time, though,
it's amazing.
She reinvented herself, though, because she changed her name to Gerda Taro Photos as well, and so she was selling stuff. The long story is, or the short version of this, though, is that it works. They start making money. It funds their travels. They start getting commissions. One of the things that they do is they realize that there's this civil war starting in Spain, and they have this naive idea of they want to capture war on film and show what's happening to the people and things that you just didn't see, because war traditionally was only pictures snapped of the generals, the bigwigs talking and having conferences, and not the guy in the trench bleeding to death.
So why do you classify that as a naive idea?
Because the way I've understood it is that it's that very young idea of we're going to go and it's going to be beautiful and nothing's going to happen and no bad things are going to happen.
I don't know who
instead they
thinks
end
that.
up in the trenches.
I guess that wasn't the
sense. It doesn't work out in the long run to be a wonderful, beautiful, artistic experience. It becomes very dirty and visceral.
That wasn't necessarily the sense that I had. I mean, they both came from kind of war-torn places.
That's very
true.
And
they understood the idea of feeling like it was important to capture the realities of those wars.
I guess idealist would be a better way to explain what I'm trying to say.
It feels to me like they were making a very conscious decision to go in. I mean, a lot of journalists do this too right now, where they make this conscious decision to go in because they think it's important that it's not just the generals in their pretty uniforms in their beautiful rooms
with their oak tables,
right? And that everybody should know what war actually looks like. And again, yes, it may be a little naive to assume that bad things won't happen to them or that it's going to be fun and beautiful. But I think it's my sense that they had at least a pretty realistic idea of what a war-torn place looked like.
Well, and they have the personalities for it.
This is also not a new idea. I mean, they've been ever since photography began. People have been taking pictures of war.
Yeah.
So not a new idea.
Absolutely.
But I do think that as a war correspondent, you do have the luxury of being able to pop in, take some pictures,
and
make
leave.
some notes, interview, and then leave.
Yeah.
Which is not something the guys in the trenches get to do.
True.
That's the really horrible thing about war. Well, besides getting your arms and legs blown off, but it's just living in these awful conditions for weeks, months.
But see, eventually that would be the thing that distinguished Robert Capa so much, is that he would pop into a trench or a foxhole, sit there and smoke a cigarette and talk to a kid who is freaking the F out because everything is just floating.
Yeah.
He's calm as the day, blowing up all around. He's just having a conversation. Kid's able to kind of focus in. Like I've watched documentaries of these people. Like, he was amazing. Like, this stuff is not the word I wanted to use.
But
it didn't faze him.
Yeah.
So he had that kind
Which
of
is why
personality.
I kind of had that sense of like they knew what they were getting into.
See, and,
I mean, they
I
had
don't
seen
know
a
how
lot
much
of
that is developed and natural.
Sure. And that could again be like a 2020 impression of them. They could have gone into it totally blind, and it just happened that they were good at it. They could have been like, "This is going to be beautiful and amazing. It's going to be like Woodstock all over again."
Okay, so
there is such a thing. Actually, there's been some beautiful war photography.
There's some amazing
hauntingly beautiful, but beautiful.
So like I said, though, let's get back into this part of the story, or the beginning of what leads up to the falling soldier.
Yeah, I guess
is that they get this commission, and I believe it's View magazine, which is a French magazine. They get a commission. They go to Spain to check out the war, and I'm going to give you the loosest basic primer on what the Spanish Civil War was.
They were shooting at each other.
There is tons of information out there, and if you want to dive deep into this, do so. It's very interesting, but it's not our total focus here.
Yeah.
But basically,
so the disclaimer here is basically like this is not a podcast about the Spanish Civil War.
So the simple version is between the late 19 teens to the 1930s. In Spain, there's a series of political upheavals. The monarchy becomes unpopular and unstable, and things like communism and socialism and right-wing fascism start gaining ground. Eventually, everybody is pissed off at everybody else. Like, it's just dirty and not good. And there's some unsuccessful coups in the early 30s. And then there is one that goes off literally with a bang, and everybody is at each other's throats, and the country divides into two parties. There's the Republicans, which are called the Popular Front, and the Nationalists, who are the anti-communists, and they go at it for, I think, 3 years.
36 to 39.
Yeah, about 3 years is how long the Spanish Civil War lasted.
Yeah.
That is the most basic of...
Yeah.
That's like not even the Wikipedia intro to the article.
Oh no, I took this puppy down.
Actually, if you want any reading on it, George Orwell took part in the war. He was in the trenches.
George Orwell, the film director?
George Orwell, the writer.
Oh, the writer.
1984.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he wrote
Orwellian.
a book. Orwellian. Yeah, but he wrote a book about his experiences called Homage to Catalonia.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a pretty good read. He is at pains to say he doesn't talk about it completely. He talks about his corner of the war, the things that he saw, but also tries to explain some of the overarching groups and what they were all about and stuff. And he doesn't claim that he explains the entire thing in total detail.
Yeah, it
But,
seems almost impossible to do that.
The Spanish Civil War is extremely complicated.
Of really any war.
And, but it's one of the more complicated ones out there.
Well,
and
because
it
it's the
is
first
also-
one where not only is the country fighting itself, but this is where the bigger European powers like the USSR, the communist nation, and the Germans and the Americans, like all these different forces are starting to push stuff in. It's described as a testing ground for what would become World War II.
There was a lot of international interference. A lot of people came from far and wide to participate on both sides of the war. Again, like Orwell, for example, Ernest Hemingway was another one, and there's some other famous figures you could name.
Yeah.
Tons of people fought in that war, and it's also, I think, unique, or at least the first war really that is totally shrouded in clouds of BS. I mean, there's a lot of BS surrounding this war that really has followed us down to the present day.
Well, I can't disagree with you, because what I wanted to have, as you guys know, I've done this before. I'm going to give you a 2.5 to 3 paragraph description of this war, and as I read it, it just became more and more convoluted. So that is a great description of the problems with explaining this conflict.
Well, and I don't mean that the war was BS. I just mean a lot of the commentary afterwards, the interpretations. That people have put on the war and the people fighting it and everything else are mostly BS.
And so with that, let's move forward, because I think the one pertinent bit of information about the Spanish Civil War is when it began, because that plays into the date of the capture of the image of the falling soldier. The war began in July 1936. Okay, we're going to move in, and supposedly the photo, the falling soldier, was taken in September. We don't know when in September, but in September of 1936. There's some things that can kind of maybe help us figure that out. The first of which is when the photo ran, the original run date of it, because if you remember, I said there was View magazine back in Paris.
And View is VU.
VU, correct.
Not View,
View.
View.
Not VIEU.
Yeah, it's not like The View, like...
Yeah, no, that's a different show
entirely
with 4 women on it. No, they were not there. But no, this magazine would run the image along with quite a few other of Robert Capa's images in the September 23rd, 1936 issue.
Yeah, so he
Suddenly lost the word issue.
So he took it at least no later than that morning, and then immediately downloaded it to the internet, found stuff in the internet cafe.
Well, no,
made the edits.
There is no internet. There is no editing. He had to hand off undeveloped negatives to a pilot who would then fly them back to Paris, where they would go to a dark room, get developed, and then get integrated in the magazine.
And
so there's got to be at least days. I'm using that loosely.
Sure, and that's the corroborated... That was the process. He didn't ever see his own. I mean, he didn't develop on site.
No, he couldn't.
He did have. I think back in Paris, he did
have a dark room.
He
in
had
Paris.
a dark room.
But he was still in Spain when the
taking
image
pictures.
ran.
Yeah.
Probably taking pictures, presumably.
Correct.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Right. But so, I mean, that's kind of a frustrating little detail in this, right? Is that, I mean, we've everybody in this room, at least, has shot film. With a camera,
a
film
camera.
camera.
Wait for it to come back.
Well, and that you like kind of you stick it in your tube, and you say like, I mean, like how much can you say about it? You can't ever go through, especially if you don't have a dark room, right? You don't have the chance to go through and say like, frame 1, roll 1, this is where I took it. Frame 2, roll 1. This is where I took it.
Actually, a counter to that is, because as you two know, I'm in a photography class right now because I shoot all the time. Yeah. And one of the things that I don't do, because digital makes this so much easier, but this instructor is really, really pressing on us, and he is old school, very old school, is you have a notebook, you write down your shot numbers and your exposure time and your f-stop and stuff like that. Yeah. Now, as a war photographer, you can't do that because you are just blazing away, but you can stop and write, roll 215, this date, this event. Like, you can give some
sure
basic details.
I'm sure they did keep track. It's not like today where you can actually just go to the image and look in the data, and there it is, your f-stop and your lens.
Right.
Everything
I'm sure that there was some taken place. But, this image particularly that we're talking about and the kind of photography he was doing, we're talking like actual battlefield,
Correct.
like bullets flying over your head photography. So I presume that he wasn't also like, picture, snap, okay,
Notebook.
okay, picture, snap, notebook. No, I mean, you have to kind of take that back.
Correct.
And so that's something else that I would just add to the layer of complexity.
More like on a roll basis.
Yes.
Right.
Label the can of the roll and then make a note of where
right,
you were
and so
what
that's
day,
that added complexity of us not actually having him saying to the publisher, this is what I got.
Well, and here's the other problem is there's the influence or the input of the publisher of the photos.
Oh, for sure.
Because at the time that it runs in view, they say that the photo was taken in Cordoba, Spain, but other people have come along after the fact and said, oh no, that was taken in Cerro Muriano, I believe is how do you pronounce that city's name. Now, that might not sound like a big deal because those two cities are about 8 miles or 12 kilometers apart. But if there's a war, that can actually be pretty important.
Yes.
And as we'll find later on, there's even more locations that are suggested where this photo might have been taken. So that draws it out to not 8 miles and 12 kilometers, but 30 miles and what is that, like 80 kilometers roughly difference? I mean, this can be huge differences in where the battlefront is. So that also throws, question of was he taking it in a serene place or was it somewhere where all hell was breaking loose? For his part, Robert Capa never really talked about this photo and what the circumstances around it. He's really kind of tight-lipped around it, which was weird because he was such an outgoing and very fun and playful man is the way that he's described.
I'll talk about all the few different reasons, I guess, probably in theory.
Yeah, I have some ideas too, but according to him in one of the few, what he said was... Actually, Joe, do you mind reading this?
Yeah, sure.
This seems right up your alley, my friend.
Do I have to deal with the Hungarian accent?
No, just do it as
Please don't, in fact.
I'm sure it'll offend all our Hungarian listeners. Quote, I was there in the trench with about 20 milicianos. I just kind of put my camera above my head and didn't even look and clicked the picture when they moved over the trench. And that was all. That camera, which I held above my head, just caught a man at the moment when he was shot. That was probably the best picture I ever took. I never saw the picture in the frame because the camera was far above my head, unquote.
No, that's amazing because what you need to realize is that he's shooting, at this time 35 millimeter film has become available, so that's great because it's highly portable. He's using a Leica camera which is more akin to the body style of a camera you see today than the old school Boxer Brownie style. So it makes it's amazing to think that he held it up and it was as in focus as it was.
Very, very lucky for him, yeah.
It's an amazingly lucky shot, which is also why people question it.
Well, he probably had it stopped way down, I mean, the swallow of the aperture.
Yeah, then, just wide open to get as much light. But still, that focus ring is the hardest bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean... I don't know if there was a lot of action happening. I don't know as much about photography as either of you do, certainly, but
yeah, we won't develop into nerd talk.
It's fine. Yeah. But I would just say that, if he had focused from the trench on kind of where the front line was happening, and then had to duck down because shooting was happening, and was just reaching up, that might account for, in my understanding of photography, might account for why it was so in focus. But again, it was pretty lucky.
Yeah,
pretty lucky.
100% in focus.
I didn't think it was perfectly in focus, personally.
But it was pretty in focus.
Other photos from that series that are in much better focus, but we'll deal with that shortly. Let's move to after the fact, though. So Capa takes his shot. He would then eventually leave Spain because remember this war goes on for years, and he would bounce back and forth to Spain over the course of that war. Unfortunately, when he left, Gerda didn't want to go. She got another assignment and she stayed, and that would end up costing her her life. If you don't know, if you've never heard of the story, you don't know this, is they were lovers. They had a intimate relationship, and when she was killed, it took a toll on him. She was in another battle area. She jumped onto a Jeep or some kind of vehicle that was moving away, and a tank rolled into it. And she didn't die that moment, but she died the next day.
Man, that's somehow even worse.
Tank just hit it, or tank rolled right over the top
I
of it?
believe that the tank hit it. She was thrown to the ground, and probably the car rolled on top of her because she was riding on the running board of the vehicle.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that she took massive internal injuries, which took about a day to kill her. So she is actually considered she's considered to be probably the first female photojournalist to have ever died in a battlefield or war situation.
Yeah.
So not the title that you want, but she earned that title.
Fairly